Good day, and welcome to the Masuk Report. I'm Carl Bodner, and it's my pleasure to welcome our guest panelists for today's show. Our panelists are Mrs. Janelle Pappas, a faculty member in the Masuk Business Department, Senior Ryan Beecham, and Senior Jessica Gittal. The topic of concern for today is the issue of college students and credit cards. It is probably safe to say that all the American deficit spend in order to satisfy their wants and needs. However, it may be equally safe to say that most students entering college are not well equipped to handle the opportunities thrust upon them by banks encouraging students to sign up for credit cards that frequently offer them more than $1,000 of credit availability. Usually, banks offer free gifts to sign up. These include items such as T-shirts, Frisbees, pizzas, and even iPods. Sometimes banks align with universities through the Alumni Association and athletic departments to issue co-branded credit cards to students. This, of course, brings in millions in annual fees. So our goal is to share thoughts about how to prepare students for this financial opportunity, identify what they need to understand, and hear the perspectives of our two students about what they believe should be done to facilitate this step into financial adulthood. First, let's ask Ryan to share what he thinks is necessary personal finance knowledge all teens going to school or entering the workplace need to know. Have you had the opportunity to discuss this with any of your classes, with your parents? Do you think it should matter if a student opens a checking account, even online, and does not know how to track and balance their accounts in a monthly basis? Ryan?
Well, I have taken a few business classes here at Masuk, so I do know the basics. Also, I've talked to my parents about it. I think that as high schoolers and people going to college start getting their first jobs, that's kind of half the battle, is making the money. After that, you learn that you have to track it, you have to hold on to it, find somewhere to keep it. And it is important to know those skills just as much as it is to have the job and to make the money.
Do you, to your understanding, do many of your peers realize that? Do they actually have a checking account? Do they know how to handle one?
I would say that as people get jobs, maybe they are not aware of it, but you kind of are forced to learn how to use all of these tools. And a lot of things are done online now in banking, which I think benefits us as students, as most of us know how to use
well, online certainly makes it convenient.
Yes.
But one of the things I find, even with some adults, is they forget or neglect to check online, and see what bills came in or what checks went out.
Right.
And therefore, they sometimes think they have a stronger balance than they actually have. Jess, what is your perspective?
Well, I know my dad is always on me about saving my money and not blowing it all on things. And my mom, she always kind of asks me, well, did you need to buy that shirt? Did you need to go shopping again? I think I'm pretty good with my money personally. It's definitely important to keep track of it, though, because you do find yourself spending maybe a little bit too much on things that you don't necessarily need, and it's important to save early, especially when, like, I'm about to go off to college in the fall, and like Ryan is, and all the seniors and everything. It's good to have some money because you're not going to have the income there. So it's good to know how to track money and how to save money and how to not spend on what you don't need to.
Mrs. Pappas, as a personal finance teacher, what have been some of your observations about our young people today?
Well, actually, that there are two sides of the coin. They have to understand that it's not just the buying, they also have to pay it back. And I think as young people, when you're growing up, you see your parents using their credit cards, you see them buying things. You don't see them managing it. You don't see them paying the bills. And I think a lot of times that gets missed, or they think it just happens, and it doesn't just happen. And so I think really making sure that you understand how that aspect of it works is really important. And I think it's something that is missing. And that's something that we do try to do in my personal finance class. We actually go online and we look at cards, we investigate what's going to meet your needs, what's going to work for you, what's not going to work for you, and why. And then we actually go through the whole process. We follow up with how to calculate interest and where does your money go when you make a payment. Do you know what balances are getting paid off? And you have got different APRs. A lot of students don't realize all that information is so important to them.
Mr. Seymour, any comment?
I think that a course like Mrs. Pappas's course is absolutely essential to students in this day and age. I remember when I used to do a little bit of the tech ed stuff and look at the business curriculum, the state encourages all kids to have some exposure to personal finance during their time in high school, and I think it's something we should really consider, because a lot of kids going off to college have absolutely no idea what's going on. And I know from personal experience having two teenagers that the concept of money is alien to many of them, and they don't understand that every time you do buy something, there's the other side of the transaction is that somebody somewhere has to pay for it, and I think kids lose sight of that fact. And things are so much more expensive now. And as I'm sure we've talked in your classes, when you guys get to college, one of the first things that happens is as Mr. Bodner said, is you're going to be deluged with offers from all sorts of banks and credit card companies. They want to get you hooked. They want to get you hooked right away. They're going to offer you pizza. In exchange, all they want you to do is fill out an application. And that's a pretty slippery slope when you don't have an awful lot of money in the bank, because those bills add up and add up and add up. And if you add that to the loans that many kids have to take out, you can really be saddling yourself with a lot of debt over the course of 4 years.
It seems to be kind of an irony that everyone is, especially since the bubble burst in 2008, more financially conscious. And yet, something like this, we are in schools like our own, allowing students to go on out the door with no facilitation of this knowledge. So the inference I got from your comments is maybe this is something we should look into mandating or making a graduation requirement, even if it's just for one marking quarter.
Yeah, I know that the state's really been pushing it. Ms. Pappas will tell you that too. And I know we have an awful lot on our plate, an awful lot of things we have to do, but it's something that really should be considered, because there are many kids who are graduating here with no idea. I mean, it's especially important for seniors when they start deciding, how to plan for the next 4 years. I mean, how to shop for a student loan, what kind of programs are available. If I don't have a lot of money, should I take out my credit card and pay my tuition on a credit card? I mean, those are questions that they're going to have to address. For an 18-year-old kid, paying for your tuition on a credit card is probably a very, very bad idea. So this is all things they should be learning about. And this building, with all its good teachers and all its good programs, is probably a great place to learn.
Well, as students, what would you think if such a course were required, even if it was just for one marking period?
I think it would be beneficial, definitely. It's really important to know about things like that, because even if you don't go to college and take out a credit card, you will eventually, and it's good to have some background in it, I think, even if it's for just a semester.
Ryan, would you be supportive?
Definitely, I agree with that, yeah.
Thank you. Mrs. Pappas, from your experience as a teacher of personal finance, what do you identify to be the most urgent information that should be dispensed to students to better understand money and debt management?
Oh gosh, they need to know about APRs, they need to know about the fees that are involved with credit, they need to know there's a difference between debit and credit, and that they're handled very differently. They need to know that it needs to get paid back and how that gets paid back. They need to know what happens if they don't pay it back. And that's one thing that we do in personal finance class too, is we figure out, well, if you don't pay it back and you're paying interest, how long is it going to take you to pay it back? So your $25 shirt, I like to say the $25 shirt you get at Macy's could cost you $60, $75, twice as much as it actually costs you in the first place if you're not paying it back on time. You take that, well, now you're paying your college tuition with it. It's not $25. It's a huge amount of money, and how fast it grows. And I think that's really important for everyone to know.
I know in my economics class, when I discuss some of this credit relationships on a personal basis, one of the things I try to mention is that very often when you get that credit card offering in the mail, it's on a 5x8 sheet. A third of it is just colorful announcement, and then you have this massive amount of information in a 7 font, and they're banking on no one reading it. And they're banking on the fact that you're not going to look and notice, oh, if I'm delinquent, they could double or triple my payment for that month. And that becomes a serious way to fall into trouble. The other thing that I think is rather demanding is realizing what delinquency early in your adult finance life can mean to your later credit rating and your future opportunities. So that's the kind of thing I sometimes find myself very concerned with, because it's almost like they lure you in, and you have to be careful, because if you don't understand what the agreement is you're obligating yourself to, it's not a contract you can easily back out of. The other thing is the minimum amount they ask for payment per month is a ridiculously small percentage.
Right.
And I think that's another case supporting what you said, Mr. Seymour, of how they're going to bait you, so to speak. And I worry about that. Is that something you have been aware of?
I don't actually have a credit card. I use only a debit card, but I do know how they would bait you into it, as you said, and they try to get you to sign up, and things can just go downhill from there. But I think that having a credit card early can be beneficial to learn those skills and to build up any credit rating. But it has to be not when the stakes are as high as Mr. Seymour said, paying college tuition, but maybe learning the lessons, with smaller amounts of money.
And unfortunately, not only banks, but even retailers will try to lure you in with temptations. Take out a card today, get 10% more off on your purchase.
Talk about that in personal finance too.
And these are things that are, you don't realize. Suddenly you've got 10, 12 cards, and you've got balances on each. And you find
annual fees.
And annual fees, and then you end up graduating not only with your student loan debt, but potentially $10,000 or more in credit debt. And that type of thing really worries me. And this has been a long-time problem. I mean, my daughters went to college in the 80s, and ironically, in their dorms, they were the only two people that knew how to balance a checking account. Whether it's online or on paper, you need to know that. And it's so easy to put it off, and suddenly you are, again, finding yourself lapsing in what you actually have as funds to finance what you're trying to do. Any other comments, Mr. Seymour?
Well, things have changed a lot since when I went to college about 100 years ago. Nobody had credit cards. We barely had checking accounts. I went to school in Massachusetts, so when we paid our bills, we could use colored beads and shells and dried cranberries. I mean, that's how long ago it was. We didn't have the same sort of opportunities that kids have now, and people were a lot more careful. But more to the point about the credit cards is, educating people about credit cards is essential, because every credit card is different. You go to college next year, and the place with a really good pizza is probably the card that's really going to nail you if you miss a payment on the 31st day, and they have escalating clauses and all this other stuff. And you're right, as you said, Mr. Bonner, they're banking on you not reading the agreement, and it's, when things start going bad and you look at the agreement, you realize you made a bad deal to start with. That's why researching these cards is essential, absolutely essential.
We actually did that today in class.
Good. Should be required.
Well, let me ask each of you, what do you see to be the most important and necessary benefits of using a credit card? When seeking a credit arrangement, should one conduct comparative shopping regarding banks? What should you be looking for in addition to annual percentage rates charged? Go ahead.
I think it's definitely important to look at the options. It's just like shopping for anything. Like, you have to look at the interest rates and everything, all the little details that we say no one reads. Just because you're going to get yourself in a lot more trouble if you just take out the first one that you've heard of. If you go, okay, I've heard of American Express. I hear that's good. People have that a lot, so let me do it. It's good to look at the benefits and the downfalls of each brand of credit card, I think.
I mean, there are some things that you cannot do without a credit card.
Yeah.
You can't rent a car.
That's right.
So that becomes a really big issue. But any response on your thoughts?
I agree with Jesse, and also the benefits of learning the system, building up credit, and there's also the convenience of it. But I agree, you have to comparatively shop through each of them and find something that works best for you, and just be aware of what steps you have to take to be safe with it.
Do you find your students respond positively when you talk about this comparative shopping?
Absolutely, absolutely. And honestly, we actually did it in class today, yesterday and today, and they are sometimes shocked by some of the things that they see when they actually look into the fine print. When we look at some offers that I get at home, I bring them in so they can see offers that come in the mail, and we compare them to what they can find online. And sometimes it doesn't match, or they find the offers online. It makes it easy not to find the information. They keep steering you away from the information, to all the advertising. But that being said, I don't think all credit cards are bad. There are a lot of opportunities there as well. I tell my students, you need one as an emergency backup. Definitely, there are things you can't do without a credit card. And you may have an emergency situation, you may not be able to get cash. It's not a bad thing. Handling it is important, though. How you handle it can determine whether it's going to work for you or work against you. So,
Mr. Seymour, why do you think we are not inclined to, I mean, everybody cares about money, everybody wants to spend money. Why are we so lax in reading and understanding a commitment that relates to our money in situations like this?
I think people are lazy. They don't know where to look. It's very easy, especially when you're young, to latch on to the first, biggest, shiniest object that's in front of you. Like, oh, wow, that's great. I know that in my own life, it's taken my wife and I years to get to a point where we have credit cards that we think work really effectively for us. It's taken us a long time. We used to, go to banks that would give you a big credit limit, but then we watched as the interest rates would spike up every month. Then we went to other banks that, would give things for free, but then they wanted increasing balances. And now we're finally to the point where I swear by my Amazon card because I get the points and we use it a lot, and it actually you actually get something back. Sometimes it's trial and error, but you learn. Watch out for department store credit cards. They have high rates. Watch out for teaser rates that say, no interest due for the first 12 months. What they're saying is no interest due provided you pay everything off in the first 12 months. Because in month 13, if you haven't paid the whole thing off, they just add on all the old interest you didn't pay. There's all sorts of tricks. And sometimes it's a matter of experience. But when you first are given the offer to get a credit card, most people, myself included, never bother to examine it. They're like, wow, this is great. Now I'm an adult. Look, I can rent a car. I can, get a hotel room, right? I can buy stuff for my friends. But I think that it's still very dangerous. The 7-Eleven down by us, I go in there in the mornings and the afternoons, and the sight of college students buying Slurpees with a credit card appalls me. I don't think you should buy food with a credit card to begin with, but buying Slurpees with a credit card that's a real dangerous thing to do. I mean, to go into debt over a Slurpee, but people are doing it.
I'm only laughing because Saturday when I was shopping in Stop and Shop, a woman in the 12 or less item checkout line was buying 3 candy bars with a credit card. My thought was, oh my God, 3 candy bars and I'm using a credit card. But I guess it's, as you said, the magic word, convenient and habit. Habit. It's just habit to pull out the card. With the skyrocketing rise in cost for college, should colleges hold back on allowing banks to target students, especially freshmen? What could be done to improve personal financial maturity? What do you think? Mr. Seymour, let's start with you.
I think there should be a moratorium on efforts by credit card companies to recruit freshmen for the first few months. But I don't think it'll ever happen. Because I think you talked about affinity cards up here, where many times the colleges and universities get a piece of the action when they let the people in. Get your official Southern Connecticut card. They go from a debit card that you have with your meal plan, and then they get in a relationship with a bank, and it's also a credit card. It's like, look, you automatically get this. Isn't this wonderful? Maybe not. But the school gets something in return. And they look for revenue points like every other business. So I think it's hard for the schools to say no to these things because it represents another stream of income for them. And if you talk to them, they're all poor and they need the income.
Well, I think you hit a valuable point when you mentioned the school as a business. Whether we like it or not, schools, institutions of education are, in fact, a business. And that is so easily overlooked. You have any thoughts about this question?
Absolutely. Actually, by federal law, according to the Credit Card Act of 2009, federal law says they're not supposed to be targeting college students anymore. Does that mean that they've stopped? No. But they're not supposed to be targeting them. They're not supposed to be going onto campuses and recruiting freshmen anymore. But it doesn't mean that they're not. And I think that's a really important thing. I personally don't think that it's the college's job to monitor that door, but I think it does fall very sharply on the banks. I really think that they need to be held to task on that. I think it's their responsibility to all of us to say, but are they going to? No, because that's how they make their money. But honestly, that's how I feel. I don't think it's the college's responsibility. I think it's the bank's responsibility, and I think they need to be held responsible.
Does this cause you perhaps to feel like you're the target of the politics of greed?
Yeah, almost like I'm being seeked out, I guess. Like I'm going to go to college next year and just there's going to be people waiting to attack, just to pounce on they can see, they can smell it, they smell freshmen coming, new targets. But I don't know. I think they should at least wait until students who are sophomores to be allowed to target them, just because then students have had, or students should be encouraged not to, maybe until like their second year, second semester, because they've had the chance to like experience college and how they spend money at college and everything like that, and then maybe decide on their own after they've been like independent for a little while if they're responsible enough to open a credit card.
Do you think students would respond positively to Jess's idea?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that maybe the vulnerability of the freshmen coming into college can be reduced with further high school education, as we were talking about, financial education, perhaps mandatory, that would reduce the vulnerability of the incoming freshmen, and then maybe the credit card companies would not be that way.
Even if we just made it more inconvenient.
Yeah.
That you had to go off of campus and you had to go to an actual place.
Exactly.
Because I know some large universities, we have universities that have 40,000 students in them. They'll have branches of banks right on campus.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, again, that's another lure to pull you in. My final question is one of curiosity. Do you think adults are equally subject to commit poor credit management as young people are? Jess, what do you think?
Well, definitely, like you said, the woman buying 3 candy bars with her credit card. I think adults don't always set a good example. I know my parents have tried to. They're pretty responsible with their money as far as I know. So I don't know, but I don't think it's just should be placed on young people. Even though we are more vulnerable, I think adults are just as guilty as not managing. So.
What do you think, Ryan?
I agree with Jess. I think that as a nation, everybody has to wake up and kind of realize the financial education is needed, and that maybe as you get older, the stakes are higher. When you're using and you're paying off housing loans and things of that nature. So.
And one might want to hope that with the record of foreclosures we've had, with many of these homes owned by responsible, educated people, something will shake us up a little bit. What are your thoughts?
I think adults definitely have the same situation. I think the only difference really between being younger or older is we're now seeing the results. We're dealing with the results of what we did when we were younger. So we may have that perspective that kind of gives us a second look at maybe I should be doing things a little bit differently. We have that perspective. But are we still vulnerable? Absolutely.
Too much temptation, huh?
Absolutely.
Mr. Seymour?
I think if you just look at the number of people who file for bankruptcy every year, every quarter, you know that adults still make the mistakes. They do it on a much larger scale, and they continue to make mistakes. There are people who have multiple bankruptcies. One of the things that's dischargeable in bankruptcy is credit card debt, but credit card companies are all over that. They play this game. Before your bankruptcy is final, credit card companies will approach you and say, you can't get a credit card for 7 years, so you're really not going to have any credit. However, they have something called a reaffirmation agreement. If you sign the reaffirmation agreement, agreeing to pay all the debt that's otherwise going to be wiped out by bankruptcy, we'll give you this brand new credit card right now. And it's amazing how many thousands of people sign those reaffirmation agreements. They don't understand that the reason they went bankrupt was because of that little piece of plastic. But they're so desperate to have it that even though they can wipe that debt out, they reaffirm it and they're stuck. So adults are probably more vulnerable than kids because the stakes are too high.
And we are competitive consumers. We don't want to surrender our power to consume. Right. I read an article recently in Atlantic, and one of the comments that was made in the article supports what you were saying, that there's been a 37% increase in the last 2 years in people between the ages of 37 and 55 declaring bankruptcy. That is a frightening statistic. Well, on that comment, we will have to close off discussion. I want to thank our panelists, Mrs. Pappas, Ryan, Jess, Mr. Seymour, for taking the time to share their thoughts about this growing matter of public financial concern. On behalf of the Masuk Report, I want to express our thanks to all of you who have joined us and hope that you have found our discussion to be something of mutual interest. Until our next broadcast, I wish you well, may you be safe, and look forward to many prosperous days.